Welcome to Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere with your host, Chris Parker.
Hello, this is Chris Parker with Everyday Entrepreneurs Everywhere, and I am here with Helen Pentz, and she is coming in from South Africa. Helen, you were kind enough to invite me to participate in I'll let you describe it when we get into the conversation, but I would call it like a combination of a business mastermind and sort of an expert educational program that had business people that were literally from all over the world. And that was just a delight to be a part of. So Helen, thank you so much for joining us today. And
thank you, Chris. It's a pleasure to be invited and always to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. So Helen, will you maybe share a bit of story? Who are you and what do you do? And what I'm really interested in is, why do you do what you do?
Okay. So that is actually the hardest question in the world for me to answer, I'm afraid.
Great.
I was once a project manager.
Yeah.
I then ran for about 15 years. I started and ran an IT contract house. But I'm in the process of reinventing myself completely. And I'm doing it, I guess, contrary to what every business school would tell you. I'm taking a step in the direction of my joy, seeing if it's exciting for me and interesting, and taking the next step. So what I have been doing for the last 2 years or so is one of my loves is just connecting with people and connecting people together. Mm-hmm. I've been running a small little contracting agency for freelance high-end business and IT people. And that's kind of bled into connecting with increasingly interesting people, specialists in certain subject areas and thought leaders. Mm-hmm. And my next step of inspiration and interest is online conferences in a way that bring this information to everyday entrepreneurs, exactly mm-hmm. in line with what you do, Chris. Mm-hmm. My belief is the next economy is going to be built on entrepreneurs, mid-sized businesses, individual talent and collaboration. And what I see is there's a huge lack of knowledge that most people have. Just some simple running of businesses, and what does it take? You come out of a corporate, in most cases, you're a specialist in one thing. You set up a business. Running a business is a totally different thing.
Yeah.
But it can be such fun. It really can be, if you can get your head around it.
So there's so many questions I could ask on that. Can we go back to, you triggered me on one thing that, contrary to what a business school would say, you're following your joy. What is your joy?
Ooh. My joy is, I want to see the workplace joyful for everyone. That is really what turns me on. So whether it be running my own business, leading people in that sense, and doing it in a way that makes it fun and inspiring for all of us and gives it meaning, or whether it's what I've called myself a business facilitator or coach to leaders and teams, helping people work out problems and making things happen. I just love to see ideas turn into reality.
Yeah. And joyful workplace, or joy in the workplace, well, that's more of the exception than the rule these days, I think.
Very much so.
What's your vision on maybe why the workplace is not as joyful as it could be, and what can we do about it?
Well, I'm a terrible employee. I was only employed for about 7.5 years of my entire work life. About 3 years of that was actually joyful. I was part of a team where we were doing something new and creative, reinventing what was the bank at that stage. And it was just so pleasurable for me as a JAD facilitator to work in teams. And I think running my own business, working with teams, project management, all of that, the real fulfillment came from seeing how much better a result you can gain when you're all working towards a common goal, and you see that there's value that everybody has to add. It's just a matter of finding where they fit best. Yeah. I think the problem is that most corporates, they want to try and control everything, necessarily so, because it gets so big and complex. Put people into boxes, cut your talents out in many cases, and you end up coming to work just to survive, not because you really want to be there.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it can be a sad state at a certain point as well. And through your company, and I know I've said the word before, but I'm probably going to mispronounce it. Solfeggio.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's solfeggio.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And through that, well, ebullient, my company name. No one can pronounce that either. So there's a maybe those are the URLs that are available. The unpronounceable names. Yeah. How do you help companies become a more joyful place to work through your work?
Well, partly by connecting the right people into the right jobs. That's the placement side of things. I'm really starting out early on my journey of how do I do it, Chris. So for me, it's about finding ways to bring people together to solve problems in a constructive way. And I'm really, really fascinated by what I've called the mechanics and dynamics of how things get done. I'm an observer of people. I'm a lover of people. And I like to see how we can uplift everybody in a team, essentially, and find ways that work for that team. So for me, I've worked with methodologies and that kind of thing ad nauseum, but I think in every team it has its own dynamics. Every company has its own culture and dynamics, and going in there, helping people to question themselves rather than giving them answers, and helping them to see opportunities that maybe they're just missing because they're so focused on the way we've always done things. I'm a very broad thinker, so I look at things from IT as my last place of last resort, but systems, structures, processes, all of those things, and then how that is built to enable teams. So what I would go in and do is look at all of those aspects, but in a conversation with the teams, rather than giving them answers.
Nice. Well, for the business events, which we'll get to hopefully in the near future on this conversation, but for the business event, we did go through some work with the simplicity scan. So that sort of that checklist. We haven't done any of that with Solfeggio, but maybe if we play with that a little bit right now, who would be the perfect customer, or who is the perfect customer for your coaching and work?
Okay, so let me say two things. The one is, the perfect customer for me is for the work we've already discussed would be a mid-sized organization. I'm looking at companies that are owner-run, where you're not driven by the profit motive, satisfying shareholder demands, etc., where you understand what is really important in doing business, where you don't have time for the politics and the nonsense. It's about getting the job done, getting it done as well as you can, and making sure it's the right thing to do. Yeah. So that for me would be the perfect customer for that.
That's very powerfully defined. So, okay. And
okay.
And for the other, you said for the piece of work that we've discussed already, but Is there other customers that you do other things for then?
Yes, so what I'm about to do is introduce what I've called a Mentors on Call service. And I think what we're seeing is there's so many amazingly capable, experienced people out in the market who just no jobs anymore. Companies have been downsizing, etc., and they really don't know what to do with their skills. And on the other side, in the corporates and in the small organizations as well, wonderful younger generation. Everybody knocks them, but they are fantastic. They're well educated, they're articulate, they are enthusiastic, creative, but they don't have the benefit of all the years of experience and the know-how. So the Mentors on Call is intended to bring the two together in a way that works, again, for the mid-sized corporations, companies, but also for the larger corporates, I suppose, as well, where you can give these people quick access to somebody who's not going to coach you and try and draw it out of you, but give you the answers, give you the support on demand, and complement your training and development program in a way that boosts their performance far quickly than it normally would.
Wow, great. And I can imagine with your experience and sort of oversight and the view of the human connection aspect, that you would be a great person to make those connections as well. Because I think a lot of people are looking for mentors that match, but then how do you even find a mentor? And if you're later in your career, how would you even start to find people, to be a mentor for? So, wow, interesting. Is that already something that people can find online somewhere and subscribe to, or is that still in development?
It is still in development, but I'm doing it agile.
Okay.
So I'm starting to market it, but I'm figuring it out as I go as well. I'm hoping in the next week or two to try and find a couple of potential clients that would be interested in piloting it with me, testing out how that works, and then refining it and developing further.
Lovely. And these potential pilots would be based in South Africa, or does it matter?
Yeah. I don't see why it shouldn't be global. It's a remote, for the mentoring service, it's a remote offering.
Okay.
You wouldn't want the person to have to be on site or have to have an in-person meeting. There are certain limitations. Obviously, for example, an HR specialist can have some value, but in terms of each country's laws and governance, that would be a limitation. But I'm looking at general business practices.
Great. And so to ask that same question again, who would be the best customer for this mentor as a service product? Is that to the individual person who's being mentored, or is this actually a company would buy it? And how would you define the best customer there?
Okay, I think the right way to focus it is at the companies, because they need these people to perform well. You don't want it to be a threatening thing for the mentee. It needs to be a supportive thing. So again, I think the mid-sized companies where they know what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, but they just don't have the luxury of time and resources to spend a lot of that time on developing their young professionals. Yeah.
So I'm seeing some synergies here. You've got your contract work that you can actually provide expertise on demand. Exactly. You've got your coaching work for the mid-tier owner-operated, companies. And then when you identify, high potential talent or talent that needs some support or guidance, you can bring in your mentors on demand. And then you have your business events that you can actually take that owner through a journey of discovery and growth. So, and that's how we met. So I'm seeing a pattern. I'm seeing a picture here that is really making sense. I didn't know all this before, so this is why I'm just so delighted to have these conversations. So, tell me what is, and you called it agile, and the way that the business event was set up was agile, but also a bit of a lean startup way, because you were really iterating and out there talking to customers, and you were marketing and selling and playing with pricing. And when you went live with that, 5-day or 5-moment event, you had a really nice group of people there and speakers and participants. Mm-hmm. So what was the inspiration for that, and how did you make that happen?
Sure. I think, again, it's that fetish for connecting people.
Yeah.
And I have, as I say, a very broad interest. I can't help myself but open my thinking, and I see that a business is an ecosystem. So I spoke to Eli Goldstein of Customer Line. We've had these conversations several times about how organizations try to implement a solution thinking this is the silver bullet that's going to fix the whole business, but it's a holistic picture. And as we got talking, I'm not entirely sure how it actually came about, but it was just something that I thought this would be really interesting. Why don't we see, particularly with lockdown now, all these companies needing to reinvent themselves and potentially not knowing how, maybe there's some really good thinking that could just spark people's new perspective for people and new ways of looking at what they currently have and where they could go. And, he has a very good network, and I'm blessed as well for all the years I've been working to have built also some amazing contacts.
Yeah, you attracted an amazing group of people. Can you describe, for the audience, what the shape of the event was? Because it was, it was over 5 days, and there was pre-work in between for the participants, and there were certain outcomes. Can you explain your vision on that?
So the intention was not just to have webinars, because I found you can gain huge amounts of value, but it's in the practical application of an idea that the real learning comes. That on the one side, and on sharing ideas. Half of us have done MBAs. The greatest value for me was in the conversations that I had with my classmates and unpacking the learnings that we had.
Yep.
So the intention was to, we had 5 90-minute episodes where we had a couple of thought leaders or experts in certain business domains presenting very short, succinct views on a certain topic, with the intention of having a limited audience then participating in discussions to take those ideas further. We also wanted to have group sessions where those people, the audience was split into small teams to apply those ideas in their own context and see where the real value came from. That fell short, in my opinion, and it's certainly something I would like to take and develop further. But the interesting thing for me was the participants, how many people would prefer to just sit back and listen, which also says to me that's why there's so few real entrepreneurs out there, because you're taking stuff in, but you're not actively engaging with those things. And that's really what the intent was that I was aiming at.
I think they did have, I hope they had some interaction, because you had broken them into small groups, and they were assigned to go do some interaction amongst themselves and report back. And some of the report outs or the report backs clearly showed to me that they were in dialogue with each other. But on the big, when all the groups were together and the experts were there seemed to be a bit of shyness going on or something, or uncertainty, or...
There were certain groups that engaged really well, and I do think they took that learning into their own businesses, and certain groups that were just totally apathetic, inactive listeners, not participating in the conversations or in the group works. So which is, usual. The group dynamics is always interesting.
No, interesting. And if we go a little bit deeper down into that one, meaning the I want to call it the symbiosis program, the thrust program. You've done it once. Feedback, at least for me, was positive, and I believe from others as well. How will you make that more? The word I'm coming up with is productive or more impactful. In the spirit of learning and lean startup and iterating. What was your own challenge, I guess, with having done it once and then not everything working perfectly, and then now having to make it better?
Okay.
What's your internal journey look like on that?
So, for me, everything I do needs to be inspirational for me, and I need to feel that I'm adding value for my stakeholders. There were two sets of stakeholders, and it only struck me afterwards in getting feedback from the panelists and speakers that they were benefiting from this as well. My intent was to give them exposure, and they gained more than the exposure. They gained exposure to each other and connections that maybe they hadn't made previously for future business opportunity. My challenge, I think, is in terms of the participants or the audience, is to find ways. I've facilitated many workshops in person. It's so much easier to herd people together and get action. So to find ways to create some kind of structure that compels them to do that work and to engage with the work effectively. And I think case studies or possibly pairing off a speaker with a group to make those conversations richer, and to have that pressure on the groups themselves to actually engage. I need to work on that recipe. Remotely, it is a challenge to expect people to do things without a compelling business reason. Yeah,
and just thinking off the top of my head is because feedback I gave you was a bit more structure, or having given them a bit more deliberate instruction to do for their in between work, and maybe use some tactics like have them post on. I don't think we had a WhatsApp group, but post their feedback slide or graphic on the group the day before the session or something. You can build in some social pressure type hit things like that. But I agree with you totally that having a meaningful workshop at a distance is that's a new art. It's a new skill that I think we're all still figuring out.
Big time.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you the same question third time now. There's a theme. There's a theme
Sorry,
here.
Chris.
Well, no, because you have these different value propositions, and I'm curious if it is the same segment that you're after, or that you think is the best for the symbiosis program. What is the perfect customer for that?
I believe the perfect customer would be business people and mid to senior level leaders in corporates. But I think entrepreneurs can, younger entrepreneurs can benefit from it. The challenge is, I think the real value comes out when you have faced some of these challenges beforehand. You then have the discussions and you start unpacking them more with that experience and the learning in mind. So the younger entrepreneurs, yes, they can benefit, but it's more of an academic exercise for them because they haven't necessarily run a business yet.
Yeah. That's a bit what I thought, because I didn't think it would only be the mid-sized owner-operated businesses, because what I appreciated with that program was the diversity of thinking and the diversity of background made it very rich and very, very rewarding for me, that there were people who were having perspectives, and not everyone on there was a positivity driven, abundance thinking doer. there were some people who were, I think, suffering from the uncertainty, and they were safe. They were feeling safe enough to share some of that as well. And I think it was all managed in a very, caring way of like, I don't know what to do. And I think having that more broad, diversity of personality and thought made it really beautiful for me to participate in. So,
yeah, the intention was to get different facets or different lights on the same subjects.
Yeah, you definitely did. And then you had different themes for the 5 different sessions, and you had a couple speakers each session. And so, looking at ways, and there might not be an answer to this, but how do you think you could make virtual workshops be more impactful? I think the whole world's trying to figure that problem out yet. But do you have any ideas on out of the box things that we could do?
Sure. I think certainly breakout groups with a facilitator is important, rather than asking the groups to find their own direction. I think more clarity on specific outcomes or objectives or a problem that needs to be addressed, as opposed to just an open-ended tell us what you made of it.
Yeah. For me, also the idea of, and how can you, I think we even talked about this during the program, the power of the informal interaction, meaning how problems are solved in the hallways at the water cooler and over a coffee in a company that, someone's like, oh man, I'm frustrated by this thing. And then somebody else might have solved it, a different way, and all that informal human dynamic. Maybe that's in the breakout groups, or maybe it's on 101 groups, or maybe that's just not able to be replicated at a distance. I don't know.
I think there is perhaps one consideration is to put more people with a similar experience together in groups. So we thought initially having complete random selection would be a good thing, but then I had a junior person who is really just a life coach, that is her business, coupled with a senior level executive COO of a large organization. And I think just the level of commonality, it was too disparate. So I think putting two people together from similar industries, similar levels of experience, similar problems perhaps that they need to address, might make that conversation a bit more real. But we've also got to create safety that, it's not a competitive thing or where people are not feeling exposed to speak out and be vulnerable.
Yeah, maybe sometimes the diversity of thought and personality is too far as well. So how do you strike that balance of lovely. So we're starting to wrap up here, sadly. I am myself eager to explore and discover what you do next with the Symbiosis program. I've already shared with you, delighted to participate and contribute if I can, because I think it's a meaningful and powerful thing. And it's not only for South Africans. There was at least 2 of us coming in from the Netherlands. There were people coming in from the US, and that was also really joyful as well. So Helen, I will include in the notes the links to the Symbiosis program in the Solfeggio business, and if people want to already buy from you or the mentor as a service, how can people reach out to you and get in touch with you?
Okay, so I am on LinkedIn.
I'll put that as well.
That's probably the simplest way.
Yeah.
I do have a personal website regards my coaching services and so on.
Great. We'll include all those links in there. So Helen, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to the next program.
Me too, Chris. I'll be chatting to you very soon.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen.
Learn more at ebillion.com/podcast.